just do it. Like you can't take a class, you can't read theory, you just got to go and you got to bomb like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't.
It's actually just a hotel. That's the Air Force that you get the hotel and all that. No, none of that. I think we get the letters on Sunday. At least, I mean, this was 2011.
I could literally talk 12 hours a day every day and be perfectly fine with it. I'm an extreme extrovert. And so just sitting in class learning technology stuff just drove me, towards boredom.
You got to start freestyling.
No, I'm not gonna do it. You're not gonna get me freestyle.
Welcome to the In the Field podcast, where we speak to veterans, service members, and those in the transition process to learn about their stories. Steven, nice to see you.
Holden,
thank you so much for coming in. How was the flight from San Francisco?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be on, and really love having conversations with you. The flight was good. Got delayed on the way out here, but still made it no sweat.
Yeah, and I feel like you must be pretty jet lagged because you just came back from a trip from Vietnam and Korea. Is that correct? Vietnam and India.
India, yeah. I think I just got over jet lag. I wear a Whoop. I'm a big fan of Whoop.
Not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor, but hey,
we'll take it though.
I give them a lot of free ads. I tell everybody about Whoop, and I love it. But the reason why I say that is because I'm finally in the green and have good recovery for the first time since like 3 weeks ago in Vietnam. But just got over jet lag. I think I got to a point where I'm a person who likes to have good sleep, and I need my sleep, and I'm trying to be good about sleep hygiene. But back in the Marines, I would not sleep or had bad sleep.
Not known for the most comfortable, or you have to be an opportunistic sleeper.
Exactly.
In the military.
And I just sort of operated off of poor sleep in the military and didn't know any better. But then I got used to like getting good sleep. Yeah. But I think traveling kind of broke me of that. And so I feel like I'm in a weird space where I'm like, oh yeah, it's like you get used to bad sleep after a while, but I think I just caught up and I'm over the jet lag.
That's awesome. Well, you'll have to report back on whether or not an MRE affects your sleep schedule. Obviously, alcohol does, or working out, but I'd be really curious to know whether or not MREs have an effect on your sleep or performance.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, there's probably not a lot of vegetables and like super health food in an MRE, so I might need to try to make up for it with a lot of vegetables at dinner tonight or something.
Electrolytes, that's all you need, and calories in an MRE. Yeah. Well, I typically ask all my guests, which MRE would you like? But we've pre-selected our MREs this time as a little workaround, but not just that. We have cold weather MREs.
Well, has any guest yet requested a winter MRE?
No, not yet. What are those?
They're better.
Are they?
They're better. That's what they are. They came in white packaging to blend in with the snow and ice, as you might imagine.
Okay.
Better suited for frozen conditions and all that stuff. And yeah.
I don't think I knew about cold weather MREs until you brought them up today. So no, I've never had one of these. I've never seen one. Did not know they existed. I was more of a warm weather Marine.
Exactly. And I'm only slightly upset about it. Granted, I was never in Alaska, but I did some winters in Germany where there was snow on the ground, and I would have really appreciated, I feel like, a cold weather MRE. Now, I've been told they're much better because they're dehydrated versus like just vacuum sealed. Yeah. Which MRE did you choose though before we got here?
So, I mean, before we came here, I just grabbed 2 out of the box, partially intentionally. I mean, when I was in the military, I would sometimes be selective about my MREs and try to pick the best one. But, it's definitely a callback to like, boot camp and early on in the military, they're like, just grab one or throw one at you and you don't get to choose. So I felt like kind of playing a little loose and fast today and just grabbed 2 random ones. And they just happen to be breakfast ones. So I guess we're having a little brunch, but I have the breakfast skillet.
Awesome. I've got the scrambled eggs with bacon, and eggs and MREs, at least the regular ones. I think there was an egg MRE that was
cheese veggie omelet, probably.
Yeah. Palatable would be a very favorable way, I think, of describing it.
Yeah.
But I've heard on the internet, which never tells a lie, that the egg versions of the winter ones are legitimately good. So I'm excited to try these. So as we crack these open, I would love to hear who's Steven, but more specifically, like, you were on the enlisted side, enlisted Marine. How did you get from, childhood Steven or high school Steven into going, I want to enlist into the Marine Corps?
Yeah. I mean, who's Steven is a question that I ask myself all the time, and I don't know if I quite have the answer yet. Still trying to figure out who I am. I say that half jokingly, but yeah, I mean, I think one of your questions was kind of why I listed and sort of my journey to doing that. I, was in elementary school during 9/11. And I remember very vividly 9/11 happening and my like elementary school teacher wheeling in one of those like, big back dinosaur TVs into the classroom and like showing us 9/11. And I remember being like confused about what happened. And I remember kind of some of the emotions around it. And so from that and kind of watching the war unfold on the news, I wanted to serve. I also, I guess I just come from like a family that's highly valued, and that's a personal.
Did anyone in your family serve in the military? Or?
Not really. Actually, both of my grandfathers did, but I wasn't really close with them. Like I met each of them like once or twice. So I guess I do kind of technically come from a sort of military family in that regard, but it's not like anything that there was like, it was never talked about.
Or,
It wasn't ingrained. It wasn't something I like thought of in terms of my family, but like I watched like, maybe most kids watch like Cartoon Network. I love to like watch the History Channel.
Yeah.
And so I just like watching like, like I've always been sort of like an old soul, like a grandpa trapped in like a kid's body kind of. So I would like watch, History Channel war documentaries when I was a kid instead of cartoons. And so it was just always something that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
There was also the aspect of like, I was a very bad student. I thought I was too dumb and too poor to ever go to college. So for me, college just didn't seem like an option. And I didn't really have a plan of what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't have family members or mentors or people who did a trade that I was like interested in doing. So for me, I was like very scared at the end of high school, or thinking about the end of high school. I had no idea what I was going to do, no plan. And at the time I was like severely morbidly obese, too morbidly obese to join the military. So I felt really stuck. Like, I had bad grades, I had no money, I had no plan, I couldn't get into the military. So I had like a really like, oh snap, like reckoning moment where I was like, I need to change something.
Right.
And so through that process, I lost a ton of weight and was able to join the military, and it changed my life in so many ways, which we can get into.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the short, that's my path, at least from the early outset,
right,
to the military.
I want to dig into to high school. So, I mean, you mentioned the the love for like the kind of History Channel, all that. Was there any particular shows or movies that you kind of remember from back in that day? And then even more specifically to that, do you feel like this was a gradual kind of progression into maybe the military is an option for me? Or was there a specific moment in your childhood where you're like, oh, right, like I've decided this is the path that I want to go down?
Yeah. In terms of shows, none really stand out. Although there was this random show that was on like TMC, Turner, or TCM, Turner Classic Movies, which is like, where you watch like black and white movies.
Yeah.
There was a show called Combat that was literally from like the 1950s about like a platoon during World War II. I thought it was great. But, and then the second part about like, was it sort of what changed or like what the moment was when I joined?
Yeah. I mean, for myself personally, I don't think there was ever a moment where I could pinpoint saying at this point in time was when I said, I'm going to join the military.
Yeah.
I do think it was like a gradual thing. I think like you, I loved watching like the History Channel or National Geographic. There was always the like surviving boot camp or surviving buds, or there was the release of the documentary Restrepo and what have you, that I was always fascinated with either documentaries or the history of different conflicts.
Yeah.
I don't think those were necessarily like the impetus of me being like, now I want to join, but I think it was like probably the amalgamation of the exposure to those shows, the interest, the impact of 9/11, the idea that I might be stuck. And then at one point in time, I'm like, I guess I'll maybe go talk to a recruiter.
There was a really good show called Surviving the Cut that was about like different like sort of special forces selection pipelines. There was like Air Force pararescue, there was Marine recon, SEALs probably obviously. And I remember like the Marine recon episode being really cool. And I loved that show. But yeah, I think the moment for me it was very gradual. I remembered spending like so much time on the Army's website, just like obsessively. Like I went to like goarmy.com and I can still see like, it's very random, but I can still see like the faces of the people in the marketing on their website. So I got obsessed with the website and just like looked at everything, did way too much research, a lot of research, not much action. But for me, it came down to like going into recruiters' offices. I went to, first of all, I was scared to join the military.
Yeah.
And so the first branch that I looked into was the Air Force, which I perceived as like very safe. I'm also from Colorado. There's a big Air Force presence there. And I talked to the Air Force and they were, first of all, like, you need to lose a ton of weight. And then I went and I talked to the Army and it was like a complete 180. The Army was being very salesy, like, hey, pretty much sign here. Don't worry about the weight. Like, we could even get you a bonus. Like, and it kind of came off as like very salesy to me, which I didn't love at the time. But the Army was what I felt like the most viable option because the Air Force didn't seem interested in me, and I was too scared to join the Marines. But I was in the Army office with a friend of mine who was interested in joining the Marines because his parents were Marines. And so when we were in the Army office, the biggest like John Cena looking Marine came in.
It was iron.
Yeah. I can already hear it. Hear it getting cut in. But yeah, so this really impressive Marine comes in. And he's
into
funny.
The Army recruiter?
Into the Army recruiter.
Wow, that is. Or they were all in the same.
They're like next door.
Yeah.
So the Marine comes in just to like shoot the breeze.
Yeah.
And he's like the coolest guy. He looks, really good. He's in his like dress uniform, not the full blues, but like, and I just thought he seemed like, head and shoulders above the rest.
Right.
So I like went to marines.com or whatever, and I put in my email because I wanted a pamphlet. And then they started calling me, convinced me to come into the office. And lo and behold, the recruiter that I get is that big John Cena looking guy. Yeah. And he just turned out to be like, he worked with me. He helped me lose the weight. He turned out to be a great mentor. And that's kind of how I ended up in the Marine Corps.
The worry about safety, the worry about, potentially getting hurt is obviously like a thing that you have to reconcile with, know, within the military, regardless of the MOS that you pick, right? Obviously, there are quote unquote safer jobs within the military. Yeah. But how did you overcome that fear? And then also, not coming from a particularly like military focused family, like what did your parents think about your decision? And then also going to one of the branches that are probably on the surface perceived as like the most dangerous, right? Quote, again, I use quote unquote liberally here, but there is definitely that perception from the outside going like, oh, the Marines, like, are you gonna, like, what are you gonna do? And like, how are you gonna make it through? And how did you get comfortable, and how did you make sure your parents were comfortable too, if that was something that you were thinking through?
That's a good question. What's really interesting is that's a great question because it's making me think, but I was actually more scared of Marine drill instructors than I was of like combat with an enemy. So my biggest fear with,
I think they're doing their job right then. I think that is the goal.
They are. Because the biggest thing that I was afraid of was failure, because I knew the reality that, and I was fine with the reality that if I joined the military, I might go to combat, might face an enemy, might die. And I was okay with that. But the biggest fear for me was not being able to make it, was like the rejection, I guess, of being like, showing up to boot camp and then washing out and feeling like a failure. And so that was the biggest fear for me. And that's why, this Marine recruiter convinced me that I could do it, and he believed in me and got me to believe in myself. So then that's kind of what got me over that barrier to be able to do that. But yeah, it wasn't, fear of drill instructors, not fear of the enemy, which is very interesting. I've never thought that before. Yeah. And then as far as how I convinced my family, I tried to join the military when I was 16, which I don't think you can do.
I believe it's 17. So yeah.
So the recruiter was like, well, once you turn 17, you can, but you need your parents' signatures. And I was raised by a single mother, so it was really up to my mom. was in touch with my dad, but he was like, you know, do whatever you want to do.
Right.
He signed. But my mom was a little bit of a harder sell. She was a little bit protective of me. But it was really like, hey, I want to do this. You know, I'll just join when I'm 18 if you don't. And she was supportive. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get, what did you get for sides? I have a really rough looking Bill's Brew, which I'm not going to use. I do have Tabasco in this one, but this one looks literally expired or evaporated. Okay. This said it was, that is, look at that. That is completely evaporated.
Yeah, that's some sketchy looking Tabasco. I got, so some classic good MRE stuff I got here. Cheese spread with jalapenos. That is a favorite of many Warriors. Tortillas plain. Tortillas are pretty solid. This I've never seen before. I don't know if it's new or if it's a cold weather thing, but chocolate protein drink powder.
Funny enough, I got that one too as well. I've seen chocolate-based powders, but I don't think this like hot, I'm assuming what would be hot cocoa powder. So first time seeing that as well. In the military, I like never drank the drinks, almost never. I would just give them away or trade them. But I actually might, you know, give that a go.
I'm a big protein fan, so I might actually try the protein. Patriotic sugar cookies and instant oatmeal, strawberries and cream, which I never really partook in.
Yep. Well, let's crack open some of these sides then while we're at it. And again, I typically ask my guests, do you want your MRE heated or cold? But these are vacuum sealed, so air dried. So we'll have to add water, but we'll be adding cold water. So I guess same. We'll have cold, rehydrated food. But let's... this one has the M&Ms in it. This is going to be... Yeah, it's not expired. I don't see any mold. From
watching the show previously, I, have thought about, how do I answer that? Do I go heated or unheated, or what does that say about me? And so glad we don't have to contend with that. But I was thinking of just going cold anyways for all the Marines out there. It depends on the situation, obviously. But in the field, I had a lot of downtime because I was a P.O.G, which is short for personnel other than grunts. So there's a big sort of like grunts versus P.O.Gs kind of thing in the military. And I was with a Marine unit, but my job was non-infantry. So I spent a lot of time kind of just like downtime doing sort of like a desk job in the desert with no desk. So I had a lot of time to like become a little bit of an MRE chef while I was in.
Nice. We have had a few MRE chefs on the show where we've concocted interesting meals.
Yeah.
This nut raisin mix, these are always really good. The trail mixes, it has M&Ms in it.
Yeah,
not
actually,
moldy M&Ms.
There's something that I saw on a previous podcast that I want to I can answer the question. You were talking about like, well, how are you supposed to make, like, isn't there a way to make a bowl out of an MRE bag? And yes, there is. Basically, you cuff. I mean, I'm going to do it like sloppy and quick to not like eat into all of our time.
Yeah.
But you cuff the outside, kind of like pants, and you cuff it down until it becomes like a bowl with the right level of shallowness. And then the cuffing provides some structure to the outside, so you make a nice bowl out of it.
That's awesome. I'd love to transition into Marine Corps boot camp.
Yeah.
Something that everybody loves to relive. Because it was, I heard, kind of like a summer camp, kind of like the Boy Scouts, especially as somebody who, I wasn't particularly athletic, didn't play really sports. I was unhealthy, but not overweight. Actually, kind of the opposite. I was severely underweight.
Kind of skinny fat? Were you skinny fat?
I was 120 pounds.
Oh, wow.
At 5'11".
I can't picture that on your frame. That's crazy.
I'm now 190. So we've come a long way.
Yeah.
Probably now a little too much on the other side. But 120, I was a stick. So double rations, all that. But probably like equally so, right? Like I could barely do pull-ups, barely do push-ups, all that. You said you lost weight before you left boot camp. So obviously somewhat getting healthy. But then what was the shock to the system day one in the first few weeks of Marine Corps boot camp?
Yeah, I mean, I would never say that Marine Corps boot camp is physically easy. It's not. I was surprisingly well prepared for Marine Corps boot camp. I don't know if the Marine Corps still has it, but at the time they had something called the Delayed Entry Program.
Yep.
And I was in the Delayed Entry Program for a long time because I joined when I was 17, still in high school, and I had to finish up high school before going to boot camp. So one of the ways in which I lost weight was like, obviously like not eating or eating very little, restricting calories, but also I would go for like a lot of runs. Like the first time I tried to go for a run, I could barely like walk out of the door without losing my breath, but I like ran 1 block to the stop sign and kept walking, and then, walked back or whatever. Then the next day I ran 2 blocks to the next stop sign, and I would keep sort of incrementally running further and stuff. So a lot of what I did to lose weight was, do some cardio, put miles on. And so my running was actually fairly decent. And I, got a pull-up bar, did pull-ups. I would watch if I would watch TV or a movie on like weekend or after school, I just like do push-ups like while watching the movie and sit-ups, just like a very active sort of healthy lifestyle, like preparing for boot camp like all the time. And the first pull-up I actually ever did in my life was in a recruiter's office when they were sort of like, yeah, because we would go like once a week or once a month or something like that for like a workout session as part of the delayed entry program. And while I was in, they were like, all right, we're going to get up on the pull-up bar and see if people can do enough pull-ups. And the first pull-up I ever did, it was like a bunch of Marines looking at me and I wanted to perform, and I was able to do my first pull-up. So that's
awesome.
Felt good. But yeah, I mean, I went into boot camp like passing the entry standards, but like, maybe not a first class fitness test, maybe second class. But yeah, I felt like I was relatively prepared. And as far as boot camp, it's definitely a shock to the system. I feel like it was an emotional shock to the system. Yep. I mean, boot camp is like very lonely. I think in the Army boot camp, you get like a phone, maybe a computer, probably a concierge.
It's actually just a hotel. That's the Air Force that you get the hotel and all that. No, none of that. I think we get the letters on Sunday. At least, I mean, this was 2011.
I thought you guys got like a cell phone boot camp, but maybe not.
No,
okay.
you locked up your phone, and then I might be misspeaking here, I think week 4 on the Sunday, because people were like, oh, you get your phone. I'm like, no, there's just like no telephone booths anymore. Like those things don't exist. So they would be like, here's like your phone back for the Sunday or whatever for a couple hours to like call your family. Like you can't like play games on your phone or anything, or like, but use your phone to call your family.
In my book, that counts. So, I mean, I got 1 phone call in 13 weeks.
Got it.
And my mom screens out, telemarketers. So I was like, I'm going to be calling from a strange number. There's no way she's going to pick up. So my 1 phone call, my 1 chance to like talk to someone was like, hey mom, pick up. I'm graduating on this date. Please come out and see me. Yeah. Please pick up, click. But no, it's a pretty lonely place. And you feel like, you're out on your own for the first time kind of, and your drill instructors are relatively hostile to you. So it can feel pretty lonely. But you make friends with the guys in your platoon or girls in your platoon. Yeah. And my strategy in boot camp and the way I went about it, I was not like particularly picked on, although the drill instructor certainly called me a lot of colorful things and made fun of me. But my strategy, and it worked well for me, was just to be a wallflower, like not stand out. So I was never like a squad leader or anything in boot camp, and I was never a particularly amazing recruit. Although I tried to be decent and got some, indications that I was doing okay, but I was never really singled out as being like, bad. I was very middle of the pack, very average. Yeah.
It's funny because like I don't recommend this advice in life or even after boot camp. In boot camp, make yourself invisible. Like I do think like I think there's some politics. Like I remember like our platoon leader or whatever, like the when I say platoon leader or whatever, it's like the guide or what. I can't talk right now. That's what the private who like gets promoted to the platoon leader or whatever. But his dad was like a 4-star general or whatever. I mean, not 4-star, but lieutenant colonel or whatever. And then one of the other ones was like the 40-year-old who joined like late or whatever. So it was like, well, you're not really going to be able to compete with that anyways. Yeah. And then it's probably best to just be like a little bit in the shadows. I unfortunately was probably a little too much on the other side where I was like, just bad enough or not good enough to like then get picked on for messing up. And it wasn't until AIT that I kind of got my head on straight and figured that out. As a digression, the good and bad about MREs is sometimes you get branded stuff like Fig Newtons, and I got so excited. And then I looked at the expiration, it was 2023.
That's okay. I'll try an expired Fig Newton.
I'd rather, you are flying out tomorrow, and for those around you, I would not recommend eating a 2-year-old Fig Newton.
Do you have a peanut butter? Because peanut butter and Fig Newtons is a very good combination.
I do not, no. Okay. Well, since that was a dud, and now I have grape flavored, we might move to the main. So you had jalapeno and just tortillas?
Yeah. Do you want to try some?
I'm good. I do like the tortilla and cheese.
It's kind of like what do you call it? Quesadilla.
I feel like you could probably mix it with this. I'm curious as to what's in the skillet as well.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So let's actually read these instructions. So mine is add 8 ounces hot water, 1/3 of a canteen cup to the pouch, stir, cut, wait 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, mine's the same. And honestly, it might not work because, like, you know, like a cup of ramen noodles
just won't rehydrate.
You can't pour cold water in it, and you can maybe let it sit for like a day.
We'll find out.
We'll see.
Now the question is, can I actually open this? So you were able to kind of, and I don't mean this in a negative connotation, skirt your way through boot camp, right? Or at least, you know, you were surviving the cut.
Yeah.
How was then the transition to job training? And then I would love to hear about your time in the Marine Corps. Were you fighting dragons? You know, were you some of the few, some of the proud? And I think even more importantly is, did it live up to the expectations that you had in high school?
Yeah. Okay, so a couple questions. Training after boot camp, expectations, all that stuff. Yeah, training. So it's slightly different than the Army. In the Marines, you do well.
No, I know.
I guess like the terminology, like you say AIT, and I think I kind of know what that means. But in the Marines, you go through boot camp, which is very basic. Then every Marine goes to combat training, which is probably similar to your AIT. And in the Marines, if you are infantry, you go to like 3 months of combat training. Whereas if you're non-infantry, you go to 1 month of combat training. And then you go to your job specialty school.
Got it.
So I actually really liked combat training. It was really cool. It's kind of like you do a lot of the similar stuff in boot camp, like big hikes, lots of time in the field, shoot guns, throw grenades. I thought that combat training was a ton of fun. You actually like also learn like combat tactics, which boot camp is very light on. It's really like, you know, how to brush your teeth, how to like use your weapon.
Like how to march, how to be a soldier,
totally,
or a Marine.
Yeah. So like, yeah, Marine is basic training is like how to be a basic Marine, and then I think combat training is how to be a well-functioning, like effective Marine. So I actually really liked combat training. Similarly, I was a wallflower. I didn't get in any trouble, but I also wasn't like, you know, platoon leader or anything like that. And then my job school was in 29 Palms, which for those who know, if you know, you know, 29 Palms is in the middle of the desert in Southern California, like near Death Valley and the Mojave Desert. And it is like, it's a small town. I'm sorry if I offend anyone right now from 29 Palms.
It's the internet. But, inevitably, somebody is going to be offended by it. By the way, this is exactly 8 ounces.
Perfect.
So I don't know if yours says 8 ounces as well. But
yeah, if you're from 29 Palms, you're used to the shade that I'm throwing right now. So, but yeah, so 29 Palms is known as like not a great place to be stationed, but I actually didn't hate it. I went to the gym all the time after class, and I got in pretty good shape. And I met some good friends in communication school, but I actually really disliked. My specialty was communications, and I chose that because I wanted some sort of skill or trade that I could do after the military.
Yeah.
And like IT, technology, communications seemed like an in-demand job, so that's kind of how I picked it. It also had what seemed like a huge amount of money at the time, and is nothing to laugh at now, but a $4,000 bonus.
Yeah.
So that's why I picked that as my job specialty. But I really disliked the stuff I was learning. Like we were learning.
What specifically about it?
It was so boring and so uninteresting to me. Yeah. I don't know how else to describe it. It was learning how to like make computers talk to each other, switching, routing, Cisco network administration type stuff for those who know. And I remember studying, like there was a really smart guy in our class who really got the material. And I remember that everything that he said to me when we were studying, I literally had to repeat it out loud for it to register in my brain, because my brain was like running away from the content of class because it was so boring and dry to me. I don't know. I'm very interested in people. I love people. I could literally talk 12 hours a day every day and be perfectly fine with it. I'm an extreme extrovert. And so just sitting in class learning technology stuff just drove me, towards boredom.
I don't want to spoil where you end up.
Yeah.
But you obviously become academically successful later in life.
Sure, we can talk about that.
And well, I'm curious because it's and I'm gonna like psychoanalyze your experience 10 years, 12 years later, is that it sounds like it was probably some of the mentality that like didn't get you in trouble in high school, but like probably caused you to not be a good student. Is that like was there still that carryover, or I'm just kind of curious, like at what point did you start to enjoy learning? Did you just realize I need to study the things that I enjoy, and that was the catalyst there? Or, I mean, obviously you passed, so you were able to at least get by. How did you handle that really boring topic, but still needing to pass and achieve it?
Okay, lots of questions there. Maybe how I passed comm school, just by the camaraderie and teamwork of my classmates. I'm pretty sure I got the minimum passing score, which was like an 80% or something like that. And I only got that through sort of just like good test taking skills. Like, here's what's going to be on the exam. Let me like cram for the exam. Let me study with people. Let me learn from them and just know enough to get by. So I like to say that I was a pretty good Marine, but not a great like IT guy in the military. Right. What's funny is like my wife is like the IT person of our household, and she like picks on me all the time because she's like, you're literally an IT guy and you can't figure out how to like turn the remote on.
I mean, well, if you were IT in the Army or the Air Force, where you'd get a real tramp.
Exactly. So I just got through it. I just passed. And then in terms of, you asked about sort of starting to like learning and like education. I mean, I've always been a curious person. I've liked learning. I was like a spelling bee, like I like loved the spelling bee, and I loved spelling when I was in first grade. And I got really good grades up until like, whatever.
Anti-disestablishmentary.
I could spell that probably. ANTIDISESTABLISHMENTAR. Anti-disestablishmentare. IANISM. You can check me. I don't know, but
we'll put it in post. I have no idea. You lost me at the third letter. I'm gonna say you got it.
Yeah, I feel like I got it. Like I think I visually saw it, but I can't wait to watch this and see if I actually
part of whether or not we actually got it. Impressive regardless.
Cool.
And the fact that you like did it, I mean, you fooled me at least.
And so, but I also went to like an elementary school, like in the back room of a church. And it was almost like, I think the analogy that I draw is like a little Red Schoolhouse in the country, kind of, where when I was in sixth grade, I was the only sixth grader, and I shared a teacher and a classroom with the fifth, fourth, and maybe third grade.
Oh my God.
So a lot of elementary school, I just drew pictures of stick figure like war scenes. And it's always fun when I find them like going through my like childhood closet. I'm like, oh, I remember this like big battle scene I drew. So that's what I did most of the time in elementary school, was like drawing scenes of like war and stick figures fighting and stuff like that. So when I went to middle school and high school, I was like kind of unprepared, but also, this is a weird story, and maybe we don't need to go into the whole backstory. I didn't get in trouble, but I went to a second chance school. And so the academic rigor and requirement was not there. It wasn't like a public school. Maybe it technically was like accredited or met some standards.
Sure.
But and the teachers were awesome, and it was a nonprofit, and the teachers worked really hard, and they really mentored me, and I learned quite a bit there. And I have a ton of appreciation and still great relationships with those teachers. But the academic rigor was not a prep school. It was like we just want to hopefully get some of our kids to graduate or help them get GEDs, but make sure they don't end up like dead or in prison for the most part.
So given that kind of school background, at what point in the Marine Corps, did you start enjoying school or learning?
Yeah, there's a thing in the Marine Corps. This is a total aside, by the way, but there's a thing in the Marine Corps called MCIs, which was like Marine Corps Institution, which is sort of like these like little certificate programs or like little kind of college classes, or it's like 100-page PDF with like a test at the end, and it's sort of like different Marine Corps, like, combat tactics or like leadership case studies or whatever. And I always hated doing my MCIs, which was kind of like doing like college work.
Is it the same as the reading the like 5 books a week or like 5 books a month? Like, isn't that also a thing, or am I making that up?
There is like there's like what's called the Commandant's reading list in the Marine Corps.
That one,
which is sort of like, there's like a selection of 5 books that are great for like a private, 5 books that are great for like a non-commissioned officer, 5 books for like, a junior officer, a field grade officer, whatever.
Did you read the books?
No, I like maybe read some cliff notes of some of them. The book that I did read in the military was like, I read a book called The Warrior Ethos by Stephen Pressfield, I want to say. He's like famous. I think he wrote Gates of Fire, which I also read, about the Spartans. And I read that because like a battalion commander who I very much respected recommended that we read it. It was short and easy, and it was a relatively decent read at the time. Yeah. But didn't like doing my MCIs. I think when I started to think about getting out, I wanted to go to college and felt grossly unprepared. And so I went to like on base, there's a thing called the Joint Education Center, which is sort of like the equivalent of like in a college, like in high school or college, like a career services office sort of. It was basically like the college education services office on base. I went there, I took an assessment, was like, I want to get my college degree after. I want to start knocking out some required courses now. And so, how do I do that? What should I take? Someone suggested that I take anthropology, which I actually kind of like anthropology now. I didn't like my intro to anthropology class. And math, because those are general requirements that will transfer well. And I took a math placement test, and there's college level math, there's remedial math, and then there's remedial math. And I think there's nothing below
it. Arithmetics, like basic arithmetic.
Yeah, like algebra 1 or algebra 2. Yeah. And I placed in like the lowest math. So I took algebra 2 class, and that, very short side story, that was probably a defining moment in my education journey, because it was night school. So I drove off base like an hour to get to the local.
It wasn't even a remote. It
wasn't remote. My anthropology class was online, but this class was at like a middle school or a high school, and it was like a night class. Actually, I think the teacher, he was really cool. He was like a chef who also had a master's in math and taught math at night. Really cool guy. Cool. But it was day 1 of class. I'm there with a bunch of like other adults, and it feels kind of like this like, motley crew of misfits who are taking like night school at some middle school. And he asks like a basic algebra question, and I'm like, I'll raise my hand and participate all the time. And I try to answer it, and I like get it wrong, and I get laughed at by this like room full of adults. And so it was a very like, I felt very self-conscious. It was kind of a hit to my confidence, but I was determined not to just like fail out, burn out. And so I put a ton of effort into that class, and I got like a perfect 4.0 at the end of it. And I think it helped me get into college and stuff. And I actually ended up kind of liking math after that. So that was kind of the turnaround moment for me, I would say. Now, I spent a lot of like nights studying, and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, kind of helped tutor me. But that was probably my turning point.
It's we have very similar stories. I failed to place in a college level math 3 times. I took a couple college classes while I was in the Army. And then in community college, it took me 3 tries to place into college level algebra. And I had to just like self-study over and over and over again in order to practice it or get better at it. And then eventually I was able to, get into then calculus and linear algebra and all that. I'm not good at math.
Yeah.
I'm also horrible at spelling. So at least you have that. But it did train me, because in middle school and high school, I had, I think, the false mentality of, well, I'm never going to use this, so why would I get good at it, right? And to some extent, right? I mean, how often am I actually using like algebra or like maybe more specific? Algebra is actually incredibly useful, but calculus or linear algebra or, you know, matrix multiplication or whatever, right? Like very rarely am I using that. But that experience did teach me of like setting goals or doing things you don't necessarily really enjoy, or just like trying to improve yourself and like putting in the effort, even if you're like not necessarily like I'm not good at math, but it taught me to just still try, and like you're not good at it and you might take twice as long as the other person, but you can still get there.
Yeah. I mean, something that I perceive about you, that I appreciate about you, and that I think I'm extrapolating from your story, you seem to me, and I think you are really good at self-teaching and learning new things. I feel like I cannot learn something unless I like get it from a person.
Yeah.
Very social learner. And so when I try to study math on my own, I just like have a very hard time with it. But I feel like I can learn things from people who are generous enough to teach them to me.
Yeah.
What I think is cool about you is you I mean, I know you took a coding boot camp, but you also taught yourself to code. You know, taught yourself the math you needed to place into college math. Like that's pretty respectable and it's pretty cool.
Thank you. I did have amazing tutors as well. Like
Okay.
I 100% had incredible tutors and mentors to be able to help me along the way. Going back though to the Marine Corps, I mean, you mentioned, you know, at a certain point realizing you maybe want to go to college. Tell me about your time in the Marines. You know, sounded like there's some good stuff, some bad stuff. Like obviously something caused you to want to go out and go to college. So walk me through that journey.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, my time in the Marine Corps was almost entirely amazing. I had the most incredible Marine Corps experience. I have some thoughts about, I think the Marine Corps and probably the Army and the rest of the military, as well as life generally, you really do get out what you put in. Sort of like if you dedicate yourself to stuff and you're present and you're there for the process and you have the right attitude, I think you get so much more out of an experience. And one thing I've noticed is that I got so much out of my Marine Corps experience because I went in there, you know, wanting it to change me, being open to it changing me, and trying to earnestly learn the lessons that it was teaching me and trying to figure out how can the Marine Corps shape me in positive ways? And it did. And there are guys who came from similar backgrounds or different backgrounds, and we had like the same Marine Corps experience, but they were complaining more. And I'm sure I did my share of griping about stuff in the Marines.
I'm really good at it.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
really good at complaining.
Exactly. I think people are really good at sort of resetting their sort of level of maybe homeostasis is what you'd call it. But you know,
how do you spell it?
HOMEOSTASIS.
Maybe
we'll see. But yeah, I think people who are like, poor in like the developing world are probably like relatively base level of happy as a lot of people who are, you know, wealthy in New York City, because I think humans just sort of find things to complain about and they get used to their settings. But what I was saying is that I think some people in the military who had maybe more sour attitudes about their experience didn't get as much out of it as I got out of it. So just the preface was, my Marine Corps experience was amazing. I love the Marine Corps. I love my time in there. I'd probably do it all again for free without college benefits, knowing what I know now because of how it changed me. But my Marine Corps experience was good. I never went to combat. After communication school, I got assigned to the 1st Battalion of the 4th Marine Regiment.
Can I? Sorry to interrupt. The Marines, great PR, great uniform. They got to get better on their unit names.
No.
The Army, 173rd, 101st Airborne Air Assault, 1st Cavalry, great 82nd Airborne, great names.
Hard disagree, and I'll tell you why.
What is first? Like every time a Marine is like, I'm in the 1st Marine 2nd Regiment. Like it sounds straight up like a math equation. I'm like, you've lost me. I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's very simple. It makes structural sense. Like you're in the 173rd Airborne. Are there 173 Airbornes?
Maybe.
Are there though?
I have no idea.
I don't think there are.
So I don't actually know where the 173rd gets its like why it is the 173rd.
I mean, the Marine Corps has a very simple structure and logic. There's like the 1st Marine Division, 2nd Marine Division, 3rd Marine Division. The 1st Marine Division has the 1st Regiment, 2nd Regiment, 3rd Regiment. The 1st Regiment has 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Battalion. So you say I'm 1st Battalion, 2nd Marine Regiment, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, or 3-4, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, etc. And that's just the infantry.
But it doesn't sound as cool.
I don't know. I think it sounds cool. And it's also easy to like know, like, oh, you're 1-9, I'm 1-7, I'm 2-7, I'm 3-8.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a lingo thing. I actually love my unit, the name. It was actually recently discontinued. I actually just saw it like on social media like a week ago, and I haven't had a chance to like do the research. My unit has really interesting history, which I won't bore people or waste time with. But yeah, it's like the end of an era. I love my unit, my logo. I want to at some point maybe get a tattoo of it because it's very important to me. I feel like it shaped me. I was in another unit that I didn't feel like was as special or as amazing as my unit. So love it. I have like just like university pride and like how you love your alma mater. Like my 1st Battalion, 4th Marines feels like Dartmouth to me, essentially.
But going back then, so you enjoyed your time in the Marine. Did you ever think you were going to do 20 years, or did you kind of enter in thinking it's just going to be a one and done? But then more importantly then, like what was eventually the thing that said, I'm good?
That's a good question. Kind of both, because I went in kind of thinking that I'd get the GI Bill and I'd go to college afterwards. But I also was sort of open to having a career in the military. And then when I was like a good Marine and a successful Marine and got promoted and got good marks and had a good reputation and, you know, was flourishing as a Marine, I was like, I'm great at this. I could make a career out of this. This sounds awesome. So I was open to both, but I definitely wanted to go to college at some point. It was interesting to me. I wanted the opportunity. Also, I met my wife, or I met, you know, girlfriend at the time, just kind of this girl I was seeing really, who I thought was very special, who I really liked.
Will she be
now
listening?
My wife.
Will she be listening to this?
Honestly, probably not. She hears me talk enough. She's like, I don't need to like listen to him talking on my commute or while I'm at work or at the gym, because I listen to him talking like 24/7. So maybe she will. But
she's the one. I've met her. She's a wonderful human being.
But maybe not even. And it wasn't really necessarily about her specifically, but it was like, I'm a person who's very family oriented, and I really want kids, and so I could tell that there was no future with this girl if I moved to like, let's say, you know, some military base across the country.
It is hard, yeah.
And I was like, this lifestyle is not very conducive to family. That's not to say that it's not for anyone. I know plenty of people who had military families that were very healthy, very good families. It works for some. I just felt like it might not work. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I like put in a package to try out for special forces. I also, when I
force recon or the
it's since been rebranded to Marine Raiders, I think. At the time it was MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command. But I also, when I put in my re-enlistment package, you can sort of maybe choose your like choose your duty station. And so I was able to sort of like negotiate a really cool duty station where I'd be on like the personal communications, like joint force communications team for the commanding general of the United States Strategic Command in Omaha, Nebraska. But, you know, Stratcom is cool, but I don't know about being stationed in Omaha. Nothing bad to say about Omaha.
I was going to say, I've got a friend I'm going to now send this clip to.
I'm just going to insult, 29 Palms. You know,
get all the hatred out there. It's fine.
But yeah, so I guess I was just really, I actually did have an experience that kind of soured me a little bit towards the Marine Corps. And it wasn't a big deal, but I was, like I said, I was a good Marine, not a great IT guy. And I was like really motivated. Like I said, I put in a package to try out for special forces, and we had a scout sniper platoon, and the scout sniper guys were really cool. I really liked them. I was deployed with them, and so I got to know them. And the scout sniper platoon was running a tryout for both new snipers as well as for a radio operator. And I think they didn't have a radio operator, so they were looking for radio operators to run it's called an INDOC, but the tryout assessment class sort of. And none of the radio operators I was in the comm platoon, communications platoon, even though I was an IT guy. Our comm platoon had like IT, radio, etc. None of the radio operators wanted to try out for snipers, and it was like a thing around the platoon because it's a haze fest, And so I was like, well, I don't know how to operate a radio, but I want to be on the sniper team. So like, how hard can it be to learn how to use a radio? And long story short, I kind of convinced my command to let me try out for the sniper team. And at this time, I'm interested in having a career. And I have a master sergeant at the time who sort of I wouldn't say blackmails me, but is like, you know, we're in charge of your sort of fitness report or your conduct marks. And we can't give you good conduct marks if we're not supervising you. So just know that if you go to the Scout Sniper platoon, then you might, you know, not get good marks. And it was a very much sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, we need the manpower on the communications platoon doing communications work. And so if you leave us to go play Captain America on the sniper team, then we're going to kind of like be like punitive about it. So and that led me to not try out for the snipers, and I actually really regret that, because now it doesn't matter what my marks were as a sergeant, and I would have much rather had the experience of being a sniper. But I'm like very happy with where things went and where I'm at now. But I think it would have been cool to at least try out and see. But
it always works out in the end. And to your point of loving your unit and all that, like, I love the 173rd. It was some of the best leadership I've ever experienced. And it was just amazing human beings, and they deeply cared about their service members. And I remember after deployment, I was really hemming and hawing on, like, do I do green to gold at West Point? Do I put in a package for a Ranger or Green Beret, or like what do I want to do? Right. And my leadership team basically just said, like, what do you want to do? Like, what would make you happy? What would you like? Do you want a career out of this? Like, what are the things that would make you feel successful? And they didn't push me one way or the other. And like, I had a company commander who was a West Point person who always like, here's my experience, but not like, you need to go this way. I had a boss who was 15 years in Ranger Battalion, and he gets like, well, here was my experience in Ranger Battalion. So if you want to go for selection, this is what it was like. But I never felt peer pressured or that I needed to do this way or the other to kind of satisfy them. And when I said, rather than extending my contract or putting in a package for this, I want a PCS and just see what another unit looks like. They said, you know, it was great having you. We wish you the best. Like, let's wrap things up. Right. And then in my second unit, it was kind of the polar opposite of just, if I wanted to do something for my own professional development, it was like I was in the wrong for that. Of like, I should feel bad for wanting to try to do this or do this to better my career or to improve or what have you. And then small stuff like I was trying to get LASIK eye, which the military covered, and it's like a 3-month recovery time. And my platoon sergeant at the time was like, I'm going to reject it because we have a training rotation happening in like 8 months. Like, that's basically triple the amount of time, 2.5 times the amount of time that I would need to recover. And he's like, can't risk it. I'm like, come on, man, please. But we actually had an RTO who
RTO is
our radio transmitter
radio
operator.
Okay.
So it's an FO. You have FOs, RTOs.
FO is forward observer.
Yeah. And during this training rotation, which was the one that I couldn't get the LASIK because of, a different platoon sergeant fell in a company FSNCO, fell in a pit, broke his leg. So then I became company FSNCO, fire support non-commissioned officer, as a specialist, because he broke his leg. And then one of my RTOs was like, oh, I want to go out in the ghillie suit with the sniper. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, he needed to go on the mission anyways. He was like, I really want to wear the ghillie suit. Yeah. And then he ended up becoming a heat casualty on the mission. They're like, why did you let your RTO go out in a ghillie suit? I'm like, he didn't drink enough water. That's not my fault. Like,
this is why we don't let P.O.Gs try out for Scout Sniper teams.
Yeah, exactly. So I learned my lesson on that for letting somebody to try something. But anyway, so you had that experience. Obviously, overall good experience of the Marine Corps. But then, and then like likewise with me, like it was like one of those things where it was like, I loved my time in the Army, but I felt like it was time to move on. I had accomplished the things that I wanted to accomplish. So likewise, it sounds like.
Yeah, similar. And it's not like that experience was like, okay, screw this, I'm getting out. But my Marine Corps experience was incredible up to that point. And it was sort of like I showed up to that unit. We worked up to deploy for about a year and a half. Then we deployed. And we had this like core group of people who did the pre-deployment training, the workup together. Then we deployed together. Then we came back together, and it really felt like a family. But then, like, as you know, in the military, you spend 2 or 3 years in a place, you go to another place 2-3 years. So there's kind of always new people coming in and out. But then when you have this long period, there's this great bonding experience that happens. And so I got really lucky that I came in, with a bunch of new people, had this great long bonding experience. And I think I thought that that's what the whole Marine Corps would be like.
Yeah.
And then when we started getting new people in and the culture changed, I was like, oh, maybe this, maybe what I had was like a very unique, very special thing. And maybe the rest of the Marine Corps is not that amazing. And some of these people who tell, other stories about like their experiences and what other units are like, maybe that's what I have to look forward to. And so again, that experience didn't sour me on the military and didn't lead directly to me getting out. But it was sort of in all of the push-pull factors. It was one thing where like, okay, maybe, I am leaning more towards getting out. But it was a lot of good options. Like any option was good. And it was honestly like I had the re-enlistment papers and I had a pen in my hand to sign it. And I just was like, it feels like I should get out. I'm going to get out.
Let's talk about the transition. Mine is looking very soupy.
This isn't super appetizing, but I could
I don't see mold. It smells fine. I think it passes the check.
If this was hot, it'd be like ribs sticking comfort food, and I can see it.
Yeah.
But right now, it's like let me see.
I see bits of bacon.
It's like
1 bite score.
I've seen this before on the show. On an absolute scale, you and I went to a Michelin-starred restaurant last night. So on an absolute scale, I'd say maybe like a 2 out of 10.
Yeah.
But MRE score, I'd say, middle of the road, solid middle of the road. Actually, there's some better MRE, 5 out of 10 as far as MREs go. That's also where you're supposed to use hot water. And this is cold water, so that can affect it. Mine is kind of like, frozen hash browns that you put in like oil to like fry. Yeah. It's kind of like if you left frozen hash browns out and just let them come to room temperature. Yeah, it's like that kind of consistency.
Taste is good. The consistency is very off. It tastes a bit like styrofoam. I think if this was hot water, it would probably be better. The bacon is legitimately like pretty tasty. And probably the only redeeming factor. But on a total scale, 2 out of 10. On an MRE scale, 5 out. This one's probably a 4 or 5 out of 10.
Do you want to do a little prisoner exchange? I try yours, you try mine. And just, looking at the nutrition facts, like it's relatively fat dense and, 450 calories. So like, it's good calories. And if I was in combat, I would, wolf this down and it'd be good. It'd get me through.
Yeah. Well, this has 710 milligrams of cholesterol. So 237% of your daily cholesterol count.
This has like half of that.
50% of your sodium, daily sodium intake is in this. There you go. And we'll have to report back on whether or not we just get deathly ill from eating these.
I like yours. I mean, it's high in sodium, high in cholesterol, so it's obviously got some yummy stuff. But I think yours is better than mine.
This looks like almost like polenta. It's potato. Oh. I'm glad we did the switch because I think the breakfast skillet is better. My take on cold MREs or cold weather MREs. Is the benefit of the other ones is them cold are still pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the issue with this is literally if you don't have hot water, it's not that good. And I'm kind of shocked. Like, I'm surprised they didn't do a heater packet so that you could, like, if you had water, you could heat it in the heater packet and then dump the hot water in because, like, in the field, when do you have access to hot water?
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking these must be like, if you're on like a relatively established base. But then again, why would you eat MRE? Yeah, I don't know. I don't really get it. I don't know if Marines use, maybe these like don't freeze. Like I think
that's the thing. It's like, yeah, it prevents them from freezing, but also in which case, like, I don't know, like it's solving a problem.
Yeah, like I think some of the MREs, like beef patty, let's say, like if you're stationed in the Arctic, you maybe literally can't physically eat beef patty because it's like a frozen puck. Yeah. And maybe the heater like cannot physiologically or can't, they're like the physics.
It can't heat.
Yeah, like
or
thermodynamics won't allow it to de-thaw. So you need something that won't physically freeze. But yeah, I don't really get it. And I feel like for most use cases, I mean, there's probably a reason why, but I feel like, I mean, no wonder I've never seen one. Like I've only seen regular MREs because,
transition. You get out.
Yep.
Did you know where you were going to go when you got out, or how did you figure out education, college, all that stuff?
You know, I think things worked out and I'm much more analytical about my decisions now, but like most of my life was just like flying by the seat of my pants, honestly. I didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. Like I said, I was raised by a single mom, so I was considering going to like reconnect with my dad who like worked on oil rigs, or maybe refineries. Maybe rigs are like, that has a connotation of being out in the ocean. But my dad worked on like oil refineries or pipelines or whatever. So I was thinking about like going and like being like a literal like oil worker and developing a relationship with him, and you know, or I thought about going back to Denver, but it was always, I knew once I left home, I was never going to go and be like dependent on like my parents again. I was not going to like go back and live with my mom again. Like I was going to be independent from the moment that I left. So it was never really an option. And there was, you know, I felt like going back to Denver was kind of like going back to a similar situation that I was at in high school, like no plan, nothing to do. So I was thinking of anywhere, and randomly I went to like a job fair on base and had no idea what I wanted to do. Talked to some like a technology company, a firewall company that was starting a veterans program, and talked to some like, you know, salesy, but like really nice, really cool guys. And they were like, oh, you might be a fit. You know, you dress relatively well. You're personable. You're like an IT Marine. Let's interview you. And my interview was at like a nice restaurant. And it was like probably one of the nicest meals of my life. And the first time I'd ever been sort of like wined and dined. And I was like, holy cow, this is incredible. You know, and they were like, well, you could either be maybe in Dallas or in the San Francisco Bay Area near San Jose. And my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was starting her PhD up in the Bay Area. And so I was like, well, I don't know where I'm going to go. I could go to Dallas where I have absolutely no connection, or I can go to the Bay Area where corporate headquarters is. And that's where my girlfriend's going to be. So I can keep this relationship going and just go up there. So I'll go up there. So went to the Bay Area.
And it sounds like, can I say her name, or would you prefer just wife?
Yeah, Hannah.
How is that dynamic, right? Like, I mean, so I left the military, no strings attached, right? Obviously just a girlfriend at the time, but like, were you like chatting with her? Like, this is what I'm thinking, or like, maybe we're doing this or this. Like, how are you juggling that existing relationship while also trying to plan like a major step in your life?
The whole thing was like somewhat chaotic, and we were like, you know, we had not been dating for a full year by the time I got out of the military. So it was a relatively new relationship. I mean, we clicked, we have a great relationship. So like, obviously like we both liked it and wanted it to continue. And I was excited about this, but I was not planning my life around her, and she was not planning her life around me. And it sort of was like it just happened to work out. Like the stars kind of aligned. And, I think she actually, we've talked about this. She actually thought it was a more strong signal about our relationship and our future than I intended to send, because she's like, oh, he's moving up here for me. He's like, you know, he's making a statement that he's going to build his life around me, where I was literally like, Dallas, Bay Area, you know, got this girlfriend in the Bay Area. I'm going to go up there. And now I did, you know, obviously want to continue the relationship and stuff. But so it wasn't a thing that we necessarily orchestrated. It was more just, like I said, literally flying by the seat of my pants, like, hey, this seems cool.
It's I mean, it's really funny when we have these conversations with different people and different guests, and obviously like retroactively it makes it sound like it's very calculated and like we're thinking about all these things, like even like the thoughts of like joining the military. But like the reality is, thought is being made in the moment. But it's not like you're sitting there and like, let me really like think through. You're just like, well, here are my options, like kind of rolling the dice no matter what. And
when you tell the story in retrospect, you sort of try to make it make sense. And it's less coherent in the moment as it is. But then also I think like intuitively we know things that we can't really like think. So there's sort of like consistent themes or threads through the story that when you look back on it, it's like, oh yeah, I was feeling this. I was thinking about this, even if I couldn't articulate it at the time.
Yeah.
But it was very chaotic because I moved to the Bay Area for that job because I wasn't ready to go right. Like I got out in September, which would have been a perfect time to start college, but didn't apply to college and I wasn't ready. So I needed some time to like take tests and to apply to college and get ready. So I had, I worked this job in the Bay Area for like a year or so while I took my SATs. I did the Warrior Scholar project. Mm-hmm. I did service to school. I took advantage of all these amazing nonprofits that help veterans get into great colleges. And through that process, that's how I was able to sort of like get to college. But to your point, which we can talk about more later, but to your point, it's not, I moved up to the Bay Area temporarily and I was looking at going to college like anywhere across the country. So
yeah,
it just complete chaos and convenience and just stumbled my way through it and figured it out.
So when you got into that role, did you think it was going to be like a long-term role or just like an opportunity while you were thinking about going to college? And then talk me through college decisioning, preparing for that.
Yeah.
And then maybe like a little bit of how now you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So no, I never really thought it would be a long-term thing. It was kind of like an internship that just turned into a job. So I really, just took an internship and, thought if this internship doesn't turn into something, then I'll like be a barista or work construction or something while I like figure out how to go to school. So no, it was not, and it was a great company and I appreciate the opportunity, but it wasn't a fit. And then sort of the other question was how I ended up in college, I think.
Yeah.
So like I said, the Warrior Scholar Project, which is this amazing,
shout out website here.
Yeah. It's this amazing nonprofit founded by these really awesome people. And what it does is it puts military veterans, probably exclusively enlisted because officers have already been to college, but puts enlisted military veterans in a college classroom for like a week or two at like the world's most prestigious schools, Harvard, Yale.
Which one did you go to?
University of Chicago.
Yeah,
did you do one?
No, yeah, I did the Yale one.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And I did University of Chicago purely just based on like time with like starting my new job and convenience. I didn't even know the University of Chicago like existed or was a good school. And then like I find out later that it's like an amazing school.
Yeah.
And had an amazing time there. Learned a ton I learned how to like read, at a college level, sort of. Literally.
No, I mean, that's what it was like. How to read and write.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
period.
Like literally how to read and write. And actually I had a sort of like world famous writing teacher where there's a class that I think the way it was explained to me at the University of Chicago at the time, there was the writing class that had you write the highest volume, the most pages.
Yeah.
It was you had to write the most. And it was one of the most desirable classes because it was taught by this guy named Ernie McInerney, who's just like brilliant. I've even watched some of his YouTube videos because he's so like fun to listen to, but he really taught me how to think and how to write in just like a couple days of lecture and was very generous with his time. And I think he was like an Obama speechwriter or something like that. Yeah. Awesome. But so that was a really eye-opening experience and I really fell in love with learning. And I learned a ton there. And Service to School is another nonprofit that pairs military veterans or service members transitioning with either veterans or people who really care about the military who went to these elite colleges, and they pair you up one-to-one with a mentor. And so I had this awesome mentor who was a Marine undergraduate at Columbia, and he helped me be like, okay, you need to take your SATs. This is some of the things you need to think about with going to college. And he helped me sort of like select which colleges I would apply to and help me do the things that I needed to do to prepare for college. He helped me with my application essays, just really hand holding through the application process. And funny enough, what actually ended up landing me in college was another nonprofit. Like I am standing on the shoulder of giants here.
Yeah.
I'm propped up by like an army of nonprofits, really.
Not Marines.
What's that?
Not a Marine of nonprofits, an army.
A Marine, yeah. A fleet of a fleet of nonprofits. The Posse Foundation, which is you've heard of them?
I have, yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's a foundation that would send these groups or these posses of, I think it originally started as sort of inner city youth, first generation college students, and I'm a first generation college student, by the way. But it started out as these posses that they would give scholarships and send to colleges. And then a couple years before I went to college, they started a kind of new model where they're like, well, the GI Bill will pay for college. Let's take our sort of sourcing model of finding people who have fallen through the cracks and who can probably be successful in college, but just never had the opportunity to go. Let's find military veterans who fit that bill, and they have the GI Bill, so we don't even have to pay for them to go to college. And let's negotiate sort of the college saving these spots for them to go.
Yeah.
So through that, I interviewed with the Posse Foundation and with some of the schools, and I got paired up with Dartmouth, which turned out to be like the most fabulous place. I love Dartmouth. So I was a part of the inaugural Posse #1 at Dartmouth.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want to beat the dead horse of these nonprofits, but I think they deserve, if anyone deserves to be over talked about, it's these nonprofits. And I mean, Warrior Scholar Project, Academic Boot Camp, they fundamentally provide you when I went, it was a 2-week course. I think it's now a 1 week, or there's a couple variations of it that put you through the ringer of like teaching you the basics of being a student, which, I did a 4-year contract. That doesn't sound like a lot of times, but when you haven't been in a classroom in 4 years, it takes a while to remember, like, this is how I write a compelling 5-paragraph essay. This is how I handle workloads. This is how I read academic papers. Like, when you get sent home with 50 pages of reading, you're not reading 50 pages every single night. You need to be able to skim it and figure out the main point of the argument and highlight the things that you need to learn. And they're incredible organizations. And then with Service to School, like, again, we've talked about this on the show a whole bunch of, you don't know what you don't know. And there's so much of life is understanding the opportunities that can be afforded to you. I think Service to School does an amazing job at pairing you with people who have gone through the trials and tribulations in life to be able to say, like, I've made these mistakes so you don't have to. And also just, I want to give you the confidence to even know that you can apply to these places. So I don't know about you, but like, I know when I was getting out, this idea of being able to get into Stanford or a Yale or a Harvard or what have you, was like, no, like there's no way they would accept me. There's a 0% chance. Like, why would I even apply?
Yeah.
And just being told, like, not only do they want somebody like you, but like, you can also like achieve this. It's like corny, as silly as that sounds. It's like, no, like, I actually can, right? And you are able to achieve this. Can I tell the story of how we met? Because it's through these nonprofits.
It's funny. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, or do you want to tell, or you go.
It's better from your perspective, but just a quick response. 2 things that I want to say about what you just brought up. One is that, dang, now I lost them. One is it actually might be an advantage for people like me and you who were bad students in high school, that we take those 4 or 5 or however many years off before going to college, because I felt like I had to totally relearn how to be a student. But I left the bad habits and I learned from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I think there might actually be like a first time, learning it for the first time advantage to coming back to college after a couple of years off of being a student. And then the second thing that I was going to say is that, I think there's this, and you kind of alluded to it, but I want to be explicit about it. There's this huge advantage that military veterans have in applying to colleges, because colleges do honestly want like very diverse classrooms, and that means a lot of different things, but they don't want everybody to have gone to the same prep schools in like the same 3 cities and have no sort of like fresh perspective or thought. Like, they want people who are from around the world, who have had all kinds of really interesting experiences. And I think military veterans, just by definition of having spent a few years as an adult outside of high school before going to college, and this is nothing to say of like the amazing things that you've done in the military. If you're a military veteran, or if you've served and you're thinking about getting out and going to college, it's like literally a cheat code that you can apply to your application, where you automatically are probably the most interesting candidate that the admissions committee is reading that day, just because every essay is like, and this is not to say that some people don't write incredible essays or have incredible experiences in their earlier life, but they read so many of the essays that are just like the same. And, you're in high school, you don't know.
Yeah. It's not against the student itself. It's just the fact that like, there's only so much you can do between 0 and 18.
Most people write their college essays before they are adults, and they have no like adult life experiences to speak to. But if you're a veteran, you have, 4 more years, which, nothing multiplied by, you have infinitely more adult life experience than other, high school or 17-year-olds applying to college. And so those are just 2 quick points that I wanted to say.
And those are incredible points. And I actually haven't thought about that. I knew that I wouldn't have been a good student right out of high school and college. But the idea that those 4 years allowed me to kind of forget all the bad things I did as a student and then have that clean slate of like, listen, I forgot all this bad stuff or the bad habits, and let me just start from 0. Yeah. And sometimes it is better to start from 0 than like unlearning the bad stuff. But the thing I want, and why I wanted to bring up how we met, is I think the kind of like tertiary or secondary things that these like nonprofits provide is that like we didn't meet at Services School or Warrior Scholar Project, but we knew each other tangentially through it.
So there was a little bit of like, who tells the story? Let me tell my version of the story, because I thought it was so funny. Like, I tell it one way and then you told it in another way. I'm like, oh my gosh, it blew my mind. But long story short, when an applicant is successful with Services School puts on the website, hey, here's a picture of this person. They were successfully admitted to XYZ school. Here's their background. And so I was just working out in the Stanford gym, because that's where you went to college and where my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was going to graduate school. And I'm just working out, at the gym. I'm on the bench, and I hear some random like voice, like, are you Stephen Fraser? And I think like, am I like famous? Like, no one's ever like, picked me out on the street.
You owe me money.
Yeah. And so I was like, it was like very disoriented. I'm like, what the heck? And then it was you, and we meet, and I recognize you from the Services School website, and we struck up a friendship. But I love the way you tell it. It's just funny to hear like my version, and then your version is so off the wall.
Yeah. So that's your telling of the story. But what you never bring up, which I find is the funniest, is that people are just like, how did you recognize, again, because we had never met before, like, how did you recognize Steven? And I go, this guy, like, and I mean this, I mean this in a nice way. You're like a top heavy in the sense of like, you're like a strong guy, like you're a big guy.
I'm built like Johnny Bravo.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
Like, there's this guy with a low fade in the gym wearing American flag short shorts, showing way more thigh than any 18-year-old college kid would ever show.
Too much thigh.
A lot of thigh. And I'm like, not only is this guy a veteran, I'm 99% sure this is a Marine, because that's Marine Corps level like confidence right now. And
also, I think I had a visible Marine tattoo.
Yeah. And so I like open up my LinkedIn so I wouldn't look like an absolute psychopath being like, are you a Marine? And be like, no. And it's like, okay, oops, sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've seen this guy before pop up in my feed. And so I look, I'm like, no, this is definitely Stephen Fraser. And so like I go up, I'm like, you're Steven, right? Like, you're a Marine. And then that's how we started the conversation. But it was just so funny because something about veterans, and like, you don't wear the camo backpack or the disgruntled veteran or like the hats or whatever. But I'm like, this is a guy that not only has the stature, but the short shorts that I was like, with relative certainty, I'm pretty sure this guy is...
It's not just it's kind of a Marine thing to wear the short shorts, but I know like there's like Ranger silky culture,
silk, yeah.
But it's like a similar thing.
Yeah. With the last few minutes, I would love to hear career-wise, like, so you graduate school, like there's a bit of a journey there that like I would love to get to, but like let's give the kind of 5-minute synopsis of like career-wise, how do you go from being a comms person in the Marines to now like your current job?
Yeah, we'll leave some content for episode 2, because there's so many things we have left to talk about and so many ways we could take this. But yeah, to be sort of brief about it, I entered college with an open mind, not sure what I would study, and luckily, like at Dartmouth, they sort of tell you something that I still think is kind of like a really good idea, that you might consider taking a very broad education, a liberal arts education, and learning ways to think, how to think, learning a lot of different things about different things instead of being like, oh, well, I want to collect a nice paycheck, so I'm going to study a thing that I can sell in the labor market for a nice paycheck. But Dartmouth tells you you might want to study liberal arts and learn a ton of different stuff for the sake of learning and like the intellectual enrichment. And I'm a big fan of that. And so I really bought into that and took a lot of different classes and stuff. And my interests were sort of in finance and business and like government and politics sort of. So I was sort of going down the tracks of like studying government and public policy or maybe economics and finance. Long story short, I actually ended up leaving Dartmouth and transferring to a college in California called Santa Clara in the San Jose area. Not because there was anything wrong with Dartmouth. Again, I love it. When I think about like which undergraduate university I have the most like affinity towards, I mean, I love Santa Clara, like great school and everything, but Dartmouth is really where I had my sort of like intellectual like awakening. Like I really learned how to like write and do research and think. That's where I took calculus and learned, just so much. And I really crammed in a full sort of like college experience in that one short year and just love that place so much. Like I said, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was doing graduate school in California, and the long distance was going to be too much of a challenge. So we wanted to be together, and, she was not, I didn't want her to, and she didn't want to, and she wasn't going to leave her program. So I was like, well, I can go get a bachelor's anywhere. And I never planned on going to an Ivy League college in the first place. So, this is great, but I'm not going to structure my entire life and choose my partner so that I can get an Ivy League degree to hang on the wall. I mean, there's a ton of value in the degree,
Sure.
but anyways, I made those trade-offs and came to terms with them. And so, yeah, I ended up studying finance in college, graduating from Santa Clara. I was big on internships because in the summers I didn't have like a place to go live. So I needed to make a living every summer. And so some summers I took community college classes to just stay in school and catch up on credits. But I worked like a sort of part-time internship at a financial advisor. Then that was my freshman summer. It was actually the place where I had my own savings from the Marines. I saved like maybe $20,000 from my Marine paycheck, and I put it in a Edward Jones. And I like called my financial advisor. I was like, hey, can I like do an internship with you? And he was actually very supportive and like, tried to set me up for a career at Edward Jones, but it wasn't for me. And then the next one, I did an internship here in New York City in Midtown at an investment bank, like on the trading floor doing sales and trading of stocks, bonds, currency derivatives, stuff like that. Didn't think that I really wanted to be on Wall Street. And so the next summer, my final summer in college, I did an internship in venture capital in California, trying to look for, startup investments and stuff like that. And I really liked that world, but I didn't love sort of exactly the dynamics of the situation I was in there. And it wasn't like an internship program that had like a job waiting for me on the other side. It was kind of like, we bring in summer interns, they can do some work for us, we support them, but like, this isn't like a jobs program. And so I ended up, because I liked venture capital in Silicon Valley and technology, I got a job at Silicon Valley Bank. When I was in college, I got my offer, so I started in their associate development program at Silicon Valley Bank. Really liked a lot of things about my time at SVB. Did that for 2 years, left before the bank failed, went to the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco.
You could have stopped it.
No, I couldn't have. There was no slowing that train down. But it was really interesting to know SVB as an institution very well and have a ton of friends there, and then sort of see it go down, sort of see it through the eyes of all of my friends and watch them like, figure out what to do next or stay with SVB or where they went or whatever. But then also at the Fed, we were it was a institution that we supervised. And so it was really interesting, the sort of crisis that created, and us trying to figure out how to respond to it, how to try to, backstop the banking system and figure that out at the Fed. So it was really interesting to have that experience from both institutions. And then, after spending about 2 years at the Fed, which brings us to like today and now, I, like I said, I really wanted to be in this tech startup world. And it just so happens that an amazing opportunity to take a really awesome role at a really awesome company and work with a really awesome friend, your company, my current job, opened up, and that's what I do now. So I've been on the job for about a week, and we work together now, which is really cool.
So much to talk about. There needs to be an episode 2. We'll pause it there though, Steven.
Before we pause it though, actually, can we have a corporate policy that on casual Fridays we wear short shorts to work?
It's currently 20 degrees in New York, so in the summertime, yes. In the wintertime, no. But I would love that.
You actually probably couldn't pay me enough to put the short shorts back on now, but we can get there.
Steven, thank you so much.
Holden, thank you so much, buddy.
Appreciate it.